1989, Don Piper's Ford Escort was hit head-on by an 18-wheeler. Don was pronounced dead by 4 separate sets of paramedics. But God worked a miracle, sending Don back to a now broken body and letting him see heaven before he went. Stay with us today on Deeper Living. Our guest for this segment is Don Piper, and we'll be talking about heaven with someone who says he's been there.
From coast to coast across North America, this is Deeper Living, bringing the inspirational marketplace to your front door. We exist to bring you the latest and greatest from authors, artists, and artisans around the world. You're going to love this.
Hello and welcome to Deeper Living. I'm Meredith Book and I'm joined today with Ginger Garrett, my co-host, and we have a very exciting guest today, Don Piper. And Don, you are the author of 90 Minutes in Heaven, and I know there are millions of people that have heard your story, 2 million, you were just saying, that have bought the book.
Right.
And if you're not familiar with it, it really is the true story of your death and then your experience in heaven. And before we jump to the next book that you've written, and what we're really going to talk about today is The Heaven is Real, I want you to tell your story, because for some of our viewers who might just be hearing this for the first time, it really sort of sets up where the next book came in. But you know, share a little bit about that, you know, your testimony with this 90 Minutes in Heaven. And as Ginger said really in the opening, you were driving home.
I was on my way to church. I attended
right.
a conference, and I was on my way to my church to do a Wednesday night service, indicating, you know, that things can happen to us anytime, anywhere. That's why we have to be ready for what happens next. And I just left a conference center. I was in the middle of nowhere in a very rural area, driving across an isolated bridge. An 18-wheeler crossed the center stripe and hit me head on in my Escort. And I was just killed instantly. And you know, folks might be thinking, well, if you were killed instantly, why are you on this program? Well, miraculous things had to happen for me to live. Starting with someone who came upon the accident, who had actually came from the same conference I was coming from. And God just spoke to him, a pastor, and said, pray for the man in the red car. That would have been me. And even though that didn't make any sense to him theologically, I was dead, he was obedient. He was more interested in obedience that day than theology. He just did what God told him to do. So I got in the car with the body under the tarp they had covered me up with.
Because the EMTs had already checked. They'd already checked your
4
pulse.
sets,
Right. I mean, it's not your heart.
It was a multiple car accident, so they dispatched several ambulances. And so they checked everybody. Thankfully, everybody else was fine. All 4 of them checked me, and they all determined the same thing after doing tests on me, that I had died, and then they covered me up.
And I think that's a distinction to make, because as you point out in your book, so many people talk about, near-death experiences. Maybe what you just saw was sort of this weird loss of blood, all of this stuff. But your heart had literally stopped pumping. You were, all the signs and indicators for death were there.
In fact, I often say I didn't really have a near-death experience. You know, when I was dead for 90 minutes. So that's not nearly dead.
That's dead.
I died, and they covered me up and waited for essentially a county official to come and sign the paperwork so I could be the body could be
transported to the mortuary.
Transported to a mortuary. And so there I lay under a tarp. And this pastor came, God spoke to him, he got permission to get under the tarp, pray for me. The church was notified that I had been in an accident, but not that I had been killed. And so they began to pray. So in a very short period of time, literally thousands of people were praying, because they called other churches and asked them to pray. And everyone said, yes, we'll pray for him. So 90 minutes after the impact of the truck head on, the pastor was in the car praying for me and singing the old hymn, What a Friend We Have in Jesus, a great song. And it says, oh, what peace we often forfeit, oh, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. He's not only singing the song, he's offering it as a prayer. And when he's singing the part that says everything to God in prayer, with his hand on my shoulder in the wreckage, suddenly, without warning, I started singing with him. And he just jumped right out of the car.
That would make me jump. That would make me jump.
And said to the policeman, the dead man is singing. And of course, that was a preposterous statement. They didn't believe.
Yeah, they're like, oh, and the same one
Yeah,
just cracked
right,
up.
yeah. And this preacher's just lost his mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he was finally prevailed on them to at least come back and check on me one more time. They did and discovered I was alive, and finally extracted me from that car with a great deal of difficulty. I wound up being taken to 3 hospitals, and then began the road to recovery, which took 34 operations and 13 months in a hospital bed. And
That's right, your legs were all completely
I lost my left leg just above the knee. It had to be surgically reattached with an external fixator. The wires and rods mechanism that stretch bones. My right leg was crushed at the knee, and my left arm was actually in the back seat of the car. So I was impaled on the steering wheel. My head was crushed.
I can see why they just thought,
it's hopeless.
He's gone.
Oh yeah, it was. I was not recognizable. Anyone who would have known me would not have known who I was, because I was really hideously deformed. It was appalling.
Well, it's such a trauma. I mean, your whole system, literally, you died.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
truly.
the impact, I was driving 50, he was driving 65. It's 115 miles of impact. If you could just imagine running into a wall at 115 miles, that's the force of the impact that I had. So it was quite a traumatic accident, a really gruesome scene, and hopeless in a very real sense.
So what do these EMTs do? All of a sudden they realize, holy cow.
Well, they leapt
this
into
guy is
they
alive.
leapt into action and did what they do very well. You know, they're trained to get people out of horrible situations.
Were they saying, "Oh, this is a miracle"? I mean,
Oh,
were they
yes.
just out?
Oh,
were
yeah.
they instantaneous?
Yes.
I mean, I know I would.
The
If that
police,
was-
everyone was stunned. They'd never seen anything like this before. Now, it's interesting, in the days and the months and the years since that time, I've obviously met a lot of medical people and a lot of EMTs, and they have recounted similar stories. They will basically tell you, never give up. You know, never give up. Because you just never know. And mine's one of those cases where somebody who had been declared dead and was indeed dead just basically God sent back, and that's what happened. Because, you know, during the time I was in the body was in the car, I was actually glimpsing heaven.
Wow.
And had that kind of experience, so I was oblivious of what was happening down on the bridge. I didn't know anything about it, didn't really care anything about it. They were the ones praying for me, because when you've been to heaven, you don't want to be here. You know, you're not thinking about here. I was thinking about there and having a joyous experience.
I didn't even know what you know, you don't really think about that. I mean, you see all these things. Now, you, in your book, you literally said that you just landed at the gates of heaven.
Instantaneously.
I mean, there was no like bright shining light coming to get you and guide you. It was just instantaneous.
Yes.
So what?
Well, I hear that, and I don't discount that, because I think, you know, in life we use kind of a common euphemism, because we say someone passed away, and we say that. I think we say it because we don't want to say they died.
Right, it's a more gentle.
It is.
way.
But, you know, in a very real sense, I think most people do pass away. And because of that, the ones who do and then kind of live to tell about it frequently do have the sense of leaving this life and maybe reaching out and seeing people on the other side and seeing a bright light. Well, you know, 115 miles an hour of instant impact. I did not have that experience.
You bypassed all that reaching
I went
out.
right all
Landed
past
right to the
that, and
gate.
I'm suddenly standing at the gates. I mean, there was no transition whatsoever. I'm confronted.
And it's a literal gate.
Oh, it is a gate. It's really a pearly gate. It's constructed. It's the best way I can describe it is, if anyone watching has ever put icing on a cake, it's almost as if someone had like a bucket of pearl icing and just took the edge of a knife and applied it to this gate, because it's like sculptured, and it really is not a pearl gate but a pearly gate, and it's because of the brightness and the magnificence of heaven. It reflects off of it, making the gate almost appear alive. It almost pulsates with life, and it's quite beautiful and large. I was surprised by the size of it, but there really are pearly gates. There really are golden streets going inside of it. We shouldn't be surprised. You know, the Bible says that.
Right.
So I've had people say, "Well, that's probably figurative language." I didn't find it figurative. You know, it really was
became literal.
pearly, and it really was
Gold.
You know, God can make heaven out of whatever he chooses.
Sure.
Gold.
And he's chosen, in this case, pearl and gold.
Yep.
So it's breathtaking.
And you didn't just pause at the gates, did you?
No, I was immediately confronted by people I had known and loved in life. People had gone before me. And it was to say the least, a blessed reunion. Here are all these people who I had loved in life and lost, and mourned their passing because I cared about them, and I felt the sense of loss. Even though I knew where they were there to greet me, and I was quite surprised by that. I knew I would see Jesus, and I looked forward to seeing Jesus. I didn't expect all these people to be there to welcome me into heaven. It was a welcoming party. And every one of them had played a part in my being there. The one thing they had in common, other than the fact they knew the Lord and they'd accepted him and they'd made reservations in heaven, was that they had had a spiritual impact on my life. They had told me about Christ. They took me to church when nobody else did. They called me on Monday if I missed Sunday and said, "Where were you yesterday?" All these people had had this kind of impact on my life. They were relatives, friends, teachers, and they were greeting me at the gates. And when I saw them, I knew where I was because, of course, I knew where they were. It was a breathtaking, spectacular reunion, and they all looked really good. Yeah.
Great.
It's so hard to imagine. You know,
It
you
is.
hear the story, and yet I'm sure there's at times where you sit there and go, wow, that really happened.
Yeah, it really did.
Yeah.
In fact, it's my reality now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not my reality. Earth and earthly experiences now are temporal for me. They seem so passing, so fleeting, because that defines my reality now. I know that's the permanent place, and this is not. So it's kind of the reverse of the way I lived before the truck hit me, is knowing where I'm going and knowing how to get there and knowing what it's like makes this seem so passing, so temporary, because we know it is.
Right, and that's really the premise of, you know, Heaven is Real,
It is.
your latest book. And we're going to cut to a short break, and when we get back, stay with us. We're going to be discussing Don Piper's new book, Heaven is Real, and this is really kind of birthed out of the chapter from 90 Minutes in Heaven. So we'll be right back after this brief message.
Hi, I'm Steve Deal. I'm here with Ryland Angel. Hey, Ryland, how are you?
Very well, thanks, mate.
Great. Ryland has a new CD out on the EMI label, and it is going to take the country by storm. You need to check it out. Check it out at www.deeperliving.com.
Welcome back to Deeper Living. Our guest today is Don Piper. And Don, before we went to break, you were sharing an absolutely incredible story about spending 90 minutes in heaven. Tell us a little bit more. You were at the pearly gates,
Yes.
which just sounds so unbelievable. We know that the Bible says they're real, but you're at the pearly gates. You see lost family members. What happens next?
Well, I'm greeted by them. And heaven has its own language, so we weren't really speaking in English or any other language. It's its own language, but there was communication, speaking, embracing. In heaven, you're not complete the way you are here, you know, because there's coming a time when reconstituted, perfected bodies will be. But everyone I saw, I recognized. They were recognizable and, to me, and I knew them. I didn't have to be introduced to them. I mean, you just know them. They were ageless, which is really one of the really good things about heaven is that you don't age. There's no birth and there's certainly no death, so the people are ageless. I had a lady the other day. She said, I said, "You're perfect in heaven. You're just perfect, the way God wanted you to be when He made you." She said, "Do you think there's any chance at all I could be a size 2?
I believe he thought I should be a 3-4.
And you know, I don't think so. I think you'll be the way God wanted you to be when He made you.
And we'll love it.
So they were all perfect, and it was such a splendid reunion to see these people. I think the question I came away from that reunion, if you will, with all those people is, if we greet people at the gates of heaven who come after us, I was convicted who will we greet?
Yeah.
Why are we still here?
Right.
And I think we're here to help other people get there. That's
Right.
part of that's the reason we remain. Those of us who remain are here to do that, because I was convicted of that at the gate by the people who greeted me.
Right.
They helped me get
Who
there.
am I gonna be
Who will
greeting?
I greet? Who will you? Why are we here? And I think that's why programs like this. It's like we're trying to have people know Christ and know heaven and how to get there and have a better life now.
Right.
And that's what it's really all about. It was breathtaking. It was spectacular.
And so what came next?
Well, the crowd parted.
Okay.
And they were letting me go in. And I was struck by two sounds. I guess I would have expected them both, but not probably on the level. Everything, of course, is a buffet for the senses. It's just an overwhelming experience of sight, sound, feelings, smell. Everything is just is heightened. It's so vivid. It's so incredibly real. I heard two sounds that were just struck me. It really stopped me in my tracks. One of them was the sound of wings. You know, here if we walk into the woods and frighten some birds, you know, they take wing.
The little flutter.
And we hear that flutter, and it's a unique sound that is wings. Well, in heaven, you can hear that all over the place. Wow. They're all over the place. Not all angels have wings, but many of them do, and some of them have more than two. They're all about, you know, that's the way we are born up to heaven by them. And they're ministering to God's people there at the gates. It's a very comforting, kind of a holy beat of these wings as they're beating. And then the other sound was the sound of music. If you like music, you're just going to have the best time in heaven, because I know there's music up there about the old rugged cross and the crucifixion and the blood of Christ, but I didn't hear music like that at that moment. The music I heard was hallelujah music. Glory to God music.
The real
Holy praise music.
Praise
adoring God, because all authentic worship is really directed at Him.
Right.
And this music is being lifted up to the throne of God. And I was absolutely stunned, not only by the quality of the music, but the quantity. On earth, if we have two pieces of music playing at the same time, we think that's chaos. We may even like both songs, but we just want to hear one and then the other. In heaven, I heard thousands of songs at the same time, and I could distinguish each one of them with my heavenly ears. You could hear each one of them separately. Now, that had to be heaven. You know, where else could you hear something like that? It was just an overwhelming experience. I was walking forward, and I'm going through the portal, the entrance, actually, of the large gate. And inside, you can actually see structures. I'm sure we'd call them mansions. That's what Jesus called them. My Father's house has many mansions. And I'm seeing inside of it, and it's even more brilliant inside, and I didn't even think that was possible. There's a hill, not a mountain really, but a hill that's kind of high and lifted up. At the precipice, at the peak of that, the pinnacle, is the brightest light that I saw. And I know that's where the Lord was, high and lifted up. And I'm focused on that as I'm going through the gates and thinking, I'm about to see Jesus.
Wow.
And there's a momentary pause, very slight.
I was going to say, you're fully conscious of the moment.
Yes. And suddenly behind me, I hear a voice singing, "What a friend we have in Jesus."
Wow.
And then I'm back in the car, in the dark.
Wow.
Yeah, wondering what on earth
You're like, I'm almost there.
has
I'm
happened
almost
to
at
me.
the hill.
Yeah, I didn't know why I was back, because I knew I was there and I didn't want to be back. In the coming days and months and years, I really was to ask that question thousands of times. Why did you let me see that and then take it away from me?
Right, and come back into
come back
into the physical condition that you
horrifying physical.
Have to go through all that trauma, and that's probably a good segue into the book. Really, Heaven is Real, and how do you come back from not only a traumatic experience, but your traumatic experience actually took you up to heaven, gave you this hope, gave you a glimpse, a sensory overload of what's to come, and you know, how do you?
And then to lose it.
Yeah, and to lose it. So not only it's the trauma, but coupled with all of that.
In a sense, it was almost like kind of a double whammy. You know, it was yes, I came back to an extraordinarily painful, and horrifying physical condition. Plus, I had seen heaven and then had it taken away from me. So, and I didn't tell anybody about it for over a year, year and a half.
It would be hard
I
to
didn't realize that.
It would be hard to share that. I mean, and have people.
Well, I call it a
truly-
sacred secret. It was so personal to me. Some people think, well, you didn't tell anybody because they, they thought you were crazy. I didn't really care about that. In my condition, I didn't really care what anybody thought about. I was just trying to survive.
Well, and I'm surprised someone, were you asked? Because really, considering that most the EMTs, the doctor, the pastor, it's a miracle. It's a miracle that doesn't happen.
Yes. I don't remember being asked. I think they were so taken with my physical condition, because I was in ICU for 2 weeks. I had life-threatening pneumonia. I was in really kind of in and out of consciousness. It was a very touch-and-go situation for a long, long time. So they were primarily, occupied with my physical condition, not my mental. And then it kind of deteriorated into a mental and state where I just became depressed about the lack of hope. I had seen heaven and had it taken away. No one could give me any positive information about my physical abilities that I would ever walk again. In fact, they were fairly confident I would never walk again, that I would never be able to use my left arm. I was really in horrible shape, and they did experimental surgeries on me rather than remove my leg and arm, for which there was no. There was no one had ever gone through this before, so I didn't even have anyone to talk to about it, and that really got me down. It was so bad that even with these devices embedded in me, with wires and rods going through the flesh and out the other side, they would say, "There's no guarantee this is going to work. After all of this, you still might lose your leg. You still could lose your arm." And I got some infections and was in isolation ward for weeks at a time. So it was a long, drawn-out ordeal. So no, I didn't tell anybody about what I'd seen, because it was very personal to me, and frankly, it made me depressed. I saw heaven, had it taken away from me, came back to an awful situation. So those two things on parallel tracks really brought me down. It was a very tough time for me. Very good.
We're going to cut to a short break, but when we get back, I want to talk about that, because it's very similar to what happens when, like a quadriplegic, something, and it completely changes their life, modifies their lifestyle, and they do. I think the first thing they go through is depression.
It is.
So stay with us. We'll be right back with Dawn Piper.
Award-winning designer Deborah Bordeaux brings you her For You Designs collection, made in sterling silver with crystal and semi-precious gems. Each item comes uniquely gift-packed with an exclusive poem inspired by the Word of God. This collection is themed by life events: friendship, love, praise, remembrance, and even salvation. The perfect reminder of God's promises for yourself or for a cherished friend or family member. With the For You Designs collection, you will never be at a loss for words.
Welcome back to our final segment today on Deeper Living with our very special guest, Dawn Piper. And Dawn, you've been sharing with us about your time in heaven. And before we went to break, you were at really the breaking point of the story when you were struggling with depression. But you've shared with us the secrets about what you saw in heaven. Share with us some of the secrets about God's healing and the spiritual lessons He taught you through that awful moment where you were sent back to earth after seeing something as incredible as heaven.
Exactly. Heaven is Real is the book I really always wanted to write. Frankly, more so than 90 Minutes in Heaven. I didn't really ever plan to talk about heaven, but people wanted to hear about it, and I was happy to do it because we're here now. I mean, we want to point people towards heaven, because Jesus is the way to heaven. If we want to go there, it's going to be through Christ. But a lot of folks are, they came home from work one day and there was a note on the table that said, "I've left you for somebody else." Their company gets bought by another one and they lose their job. They're going through an addiction that no one else knows about, and they're trying to overcome it by themselves. They're going through a tragedy, a loss, a disaster, and they're thinking, will I ever be the same again? And the answer is no. But human nature is we try to go back and be the way we were before the thing happened to us. I tried to do that without any success at all. It depressed me a great deal. One good thing about hitting the bottom is that when you do, you can push off of the bottom. And I got to that point, I got to the point in my life where I was just at the bottom. And the only way I was going to be able to get any hope about it was to take the circumstances of my life and try to help somebody else get to the same thing. I couldn't find anybody to help me. Everybody was sensitive, they were thoughtful, they were encouraging, but no one had been through what I had been through.
And they probably didn't know what to say.
They didn't know what to say.
You know.
So I wanted to become that go-to person, and I wanted to create resources that would help people get through the trying times of life. That's what Heaven is Real is about. It's how to find a new normal. And by that I mean really redefining who you are and what you can do. I cannot do the same things I did before the wreck hit me. I have severe physical limitations. I could either be bitter about that or I could find a way to be better. And so I've chosen better. I often say I've been beaten up, but I'm not beaten unless I allow myself to be. And I was beaten for a while, but I decided to try to find ways to do it. So this book is about practical things, about developing, even simple as developing a sense of humor about your experience and learning to laugh about your circumstances. It's a way to bridge the gap between the way your life used to be and it is now. So a very practical book, a helpful book about lessons on joyful living. By that I mean, we know where we're going if we're Christians. We're going to heaven. Why don't we act like we believe that? Why don't we live that way? You know, if we know the destination, the trip will be easier and better. So we wanted to give them some practical ways to learn to live that way, even though they're never going to be different. Ways to turn their disappointments into divine appointments.
Well, and it even goes beyond just the almost getting past that coping stage. Like, I'm just coping.
Yes, you don't want to just survive.
Yeah, you
Succeed.
want to. And I think, you know, like you were talking, you know, 90 Minutes in Heaven was the story you didn't want to tell.
Yes.
And you left it off with the why. And this really is the why. Like,
it is the why.
This is the book that you wanted to write. This is the message that you want to take. This was the purpose, the reason for all of this happening in your life.
I feel like this is a ministry tool.
Oh, it is.
It's going to be a book that people could say, you know what, I know you're going through a tough time. I've got something for you. I think this will help you. And that's really what we wanted to accomplish.
Well, and that would not have been as, I think, profound and would not have set up necessarily your credibility had you not come back with all the physical limitations of that car crash. I mean, had you walked truly a divine miracle, gone to heaven and came back whole, you would have had this great thing, and the message would have spoken, you know, still speak out that hope to everybody that goes, oh, there is a heaven, and it wasn't, it exists, and this man was there. But had you not had to work through all of those emotions,
it was a process,
and work through that process, now you would, this book wouldn't be here.
It's much more, this is practical. This is where people are. This is where they are. And if you're hurting, or you're confused, or you're really just struggling with life, I think this will be helpful.
So, Heaven is Real by Don Piper, and this is incredible. It is going to be available on our website at www.deeperliving.com. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you've been inspired and incredibly blessed by the testimony and the message that Don has shared with Ginger and I, and with all of you out there watching, and continue to watch us right here on Deeper Living.